Cold War was a time of espionage and deadly aircraft, but one of the most feared jets was actually a secret weapon of France. The sleek Sud-Ouest Vautour, bearing a striking resemblance to Soviet designs, had the USSR shaking in its boots with its twin-engine power and supersonic capabilities. Behind its familiar facade hid a revolutionary aircraft, boasting a top speed exceeding 1,100 kilometers per hour and the ability to deliver devastating bombing runs. From dropping payloads at high altitudes to engaging in nighttime combat, the Vautour proved its versatility as both bomber and interceptor. This game-changer, whose full potential is only now being revealed, became a symbol of French ingenuity during the Cold War. During the Second World War, French aircraft production took a massive hit. Most factories were wiped out, and engineering teams were thrown into chaos, setting back their tech progress significantly. By the early 1950s, France was almost clueless about jet propulsion, but come June 1951, the French Air Force, or Armée de l'Air, laid down a comprehensive plan for a jet-powered aircraft that could handle multiple roles, from bombing and low-level attacks to being an all-weather interceptor. Rising to this challenge, the French aircraft manufacturer, known as the National Society of Aeronautical Constructions of the Southwest, or SNCASO, decided to tweak their SO4000 design. The prototype, which they nicknamed the Vautour, French for vulture, took to the skies for testing. It didn't just fly, it showcased its versatility in all the assigned roles, convincing the authorities to move ahead with further development. Aviation buffs in the early 1950s were buzzing. They saw the Vautour as the most promising twin-jet military aircraft in all of Western Europe. The Sud-Aviation Vautour was a medium-sized military aircraft with a straightforward shoulder-wing monoplane design, sporting a swept wing and a flying tail. It ran on two Snecma ATAR 101 turbojet engines nestled in pods under the wings. The central fuselage housed a roomy weapons bay stretching 16 feet 5 inches. Despite its robust build, the Sud-Ouest bomber lacked advanced radar systems or the sophisticated navigation and attack tech seen in other aircraft of its era. Instead, the bombardier had to rely on an old World War II American-made Norden bomb sight to aim, sitting up front in the nose for the best view. Alongside the bombardier, the pilot made up the two-person crew. There were three main versions of this aircraft: the Vautour 2A for attacks, armed with 4 20mm cannons and bombs; the 2B bomber, with a modified glazed nose for the bombardier; and the Vautour 2N night fighter, which came with specialized interception radar in the nose and a 2-seat layout. On October 16, 1952, the first prototype of the updated design, now called the SO4050, took its first flight. The test flights went off without a hitch, with one Vautour prototype even breaking the sound barrier in a shallow dive. Following this success, an order came in for 6 pre-production models. For testing, one of these was fitted with a pair of Armstrong Siddeley Sapphire engines, while another sported Rolls-Royce Avon engines, both being British designs. The remaining pre-production aircraft used the French ATAR engines. Every production model that followed was equipped with the ATAR engine, and thanks to water injection, the Vautour had enough thrust to lift off with a full load. An initial squadron of 4 Vautour 2B, the specialized 2B bomber variants, each capable of carrying a nuclear weapon, formed the first air-based element of the French Air Force's strike force under the Strategic Air Force Command, which was set up in 1955. Though the Vautour was quite capable when first developed, it never got the engines it truly needed. Even as better engines became available, the French stuck with their homegrown options. As an interceptor, the Vautour was soon left behind by newer designs. Its roles as a bomber and attack aircraft were also hampered by the absence of a cutting-edge attack radar and navigation system, a major drawback. Reports suggested that the Vautour's performance was seen as only good enough for temporary use. To keep the model relevant, some modifications were made, like adding a buddy pack and external fuel tanks, which allowed pairs of Vautours to refuel each other mid-air, thus extending their range. In 1958, the Vautour joined the French Air Force and served for several decades. The last of them retired from frontline service in 1970, though a few continued in secondary roles until the 1980s. The Vautour never saw action with France, but it found a new life with Israel. After some test flights in early 1957, the Israeli Air Force selected the Vautour to replace their de Havilland Mosquitoes for long-range attacks and to counter the Arab nation's Ilyushin Il-28 light jet bombers. The first Vautour arrived in Israel on August 1, 1957, in complete secrecy. Delivered at a pace of 1 or 2 per month and sporting French Air Force markings to keep things under wraps, the aircraft's presence was kept hidden until the summer of 1958. Both the Vautour 2B and 2A were limited to clear weather daytime missions, but the 2N interceptor model had more flexibility. With its radar system, it could operate at night and in poor weather. In the Israeli Air Force, where clear skies and daylight missions were the norm, the Sud-Ouest Vautour's lack of sophisticated targeting and navigation gear wasn't as big a drawback as it had been in Western Europe. Typically, the aircraft was outfitted with a pair of 30mm cannons, up to 4 detachable underwing rocket pods with 19 air-to-ground rockets each, and up to 3,000 pounds of bombs. Alternatively, it could carry a maximum of 232 68mm missiles internally in the bomb bay. Additionally, it could mount 4,000 pounds of bombs externally. The internal bomb bay of a single Vautour could even hold either an AN-11 or an AN-22, France's first nuclear bombs. 2 Israeli Air Force squadrons flew the Vautour, the Bat Squadron, which handled the 2N variant, and the Knights of the Heart, which operated the 2A and 2B models. At first, the 7-2Ns were used as night interceptors. After the Vautour were all delivered by 1958, the squadrons began training with their new planes, though live combat often interrupted their practice. The first clash between these French-made aircraft and a Russian model happened on August 16, 1959, when 2 Vautours faced off against 4 Egyptian-owned MiGs near the Israeli-Egyptian border. Remarkably, all planes came out of the encounter without a scratch. During the 1960s, Israel found itself in a series of clashes with Syria over control of vital water resources, a conflict known as the War for the Water. This struggle eventually escalated into the Six-Day War. The Israeli Air Force, relying heavily on their Vautour attack aircraft, frequently targeted Syrian positions. In a significant operation on November 13, 1964, 5 Vautours launched a large-scale assault on Syrian defenses in the Golan Heights. Despite one plane being hit by anti-aircraft fire, the crew managed to complete their mission and safely return to base. The assaults on this region persisted until the summer of 1966. During this period, all Vautour models were reassigned to the Knights of the Heart Squadron, where they continued to serve as attack aircraft. Most of their advanced night navigation and radar systems were stripped out, except for a single aircraft that was converted for reconnaissance, outfitted with cameras in the bomb bay. When the Six-Day War, known as Operation Moked, kicked off, Vautour were pivotal in attacking air bases in Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. They zeroed in on the most fortified locations, including bases that housed numerous Tupolev Tu-16 bombers. Throughout the conflict, Israel lost only 8 Vautours to enemy action. In late July 1969, in one of their last combat roles, Vautour participated in strikes against Egyptian forces near the Suez Canal, with Syrian artillery being the target the following month. After more than 10 years in service, the arrival of new fighter jets from the United States in the late 1960s marked the end of the line for Israel's Vautours. The introduction of A-4 Skyhawks and F-4 Phantoms meant these newer aircraft took over all the Vautours' roles, from photo reconnaissance to electronic warfare. By early 1972, the Vautours were retired, with the Knights of the Heart Squadron transitioning to Skyhawks. Interestingly, the Vautour never saw combat while in service with the French Air Force, despite initial plans for a much larger fleet. Ultimately, only about 140 units of all 3 variants were delivered. The shortcomings of the Vautour led France to call for a new high-performance bomber around the time these aircraft were still rolling off the production line. Sud Aviation pitched an upgraded Super Vautour to meet the new requirement, promising an extended combat radius of 1,700 miles and speeds reaching at least Mach 0.9. However, the French Air Force chose to go with Dassault's Mirage 4, which eventually took over the bombing duties from the Vautour. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit the like button before you go. We bring you new content regularly, so stay tuned.